Okay, so today we're looking at the component 2 of the A-level film studies Eduqas course. So before we get into the detail on exactly what's on component 2, let's just have a brief overview of the entire qualification. Okay, so the whole A-level course of film studies consists of 3 components. Component 1 is an exam worth 35% of the overall qualification. Component 2 is also an exam worth another 35% of the overall qualification. And Component 3 is the coursework unit, or as they call it, non-examination assessment. And that's worth 30%. So I put together other videos for Components 1 and 3 to help you with those. But for now, we're just going to focus on Component 2. In Component 2, the exam is 2.5 hours long. There are 100 marks available, and there are 4 sections to complete. So within those 4 sections, there's 5 films you need to discuss in total. So I'm just going to go through each of the sections and tell you what you should be looking for and what you're going to need to be studying, as well as the individual films that we'll be using on my course. So the first section, section A, is called Global Film. It's the biggest part of the exam, and you need to spend an hour of your exam time on this response. You'll need to write about 2 films here. That's Pan's Labyrinth and Wild Tales, both of which are foreign language films. There's no specialist study area on this section. It's the only section where there's no specialist study area. So all questions will be centered on the core areas, and that means you'll be writing about how the key elements create effect and meaning. So that could relate to aesthetic qualities, representation, contexts, or sort of general narrative, character, genre, etc. Revision for this topic should therefore be focused very strongly on the key sequences from both of these films. Make sure that you know them well. Watch them, rewatch them, learn them in detail. Make sure that you understand the contexts to them. And consider what meanings are created. A good tip here is to always strive to find deeper levels of meaning. Don't just centre on the most obvious and sort of basic layers of meaning. You can always go deeper and look at the way context is being reflected, or themes are being shown, or messages communicated. There are some videos on this channel which will help you analyse those individual sequences, so check those out. But it's always a good idea to try to arrive at the key points independently in order to really embed your understanding. You'll get a lot more from your learning if you arrive at it independently. So yeah, I can give you the points, and I will do on those videos, but do your best to get there yourself, and you'll remember them a lot better. Okay, section B. This second section is the documentary film topic, and for this you'll be focusing on Amy. This section is worth 20 marks, and you should spend 30 minutes on it. Here, as in all the other questions, you'll get a choice of question from 2 choices. As well as the core areas, there are 2 specialist study areas which could come up in these questions. First of these is filmmakers' theories, and for this you need to study 2 different filmmakers' approaches to documentary filmmaking and weigh up how far Amy does or doesn't compare. The second specialist area is critical debates. Here you'll need to be able to discuss to what extent digital technologies have had an impact on documentary filmmaking, and then use Amy for specific reference for that. Section C. This is based on silent cinema, and for this we'll be looking at 4 of the short films of Buster Keaton. This section is also worth 20 marks, and again will take you 30 minutes to complete. So here you will need to study a different critical debate. This time the differences between two styles of filmmaking in early cinema, and that is the realist versus the expressive. You'll need to be able to discuss how far the Buster Keaton films that you have studied could be part of or influenced by either the realist style of filmmaking. That's the idea that film should be realistic and portray sort of authentic depictions of real life. Or whether it belongs to the expressive movement, where films are more imaginative and fantastical, detached from reality. You'll have one question to answer from a choice of two, and again, the core areas are likely to come up in this section. Something about how the key elements create meaning, perhaps, or how the film reflects its cultural contexts is a likely question here. Revisions activities for the silent cinema section, which would really help your chances of success. Watch the set short films, look at past questions, mostly make sure that you have a firm grasp of what is meant by the expressive and the realist. Know what those what the characteristics are of those film styles. You know, what does it mean to be a sort of expressionist filmmaker or a realist filmmaker? What do those films look like? And if you've got a little bit of background knowledge as well about other sort of silent cinema stars, particularly in the field of American silent comedy, which is what Buster Keaton is. So people like Harold Lloyd or Charlie Chaplin, just knowing those names is a good start. But if you know just a little bit about who they were or what they did, obviously that's going to be helpful. And also, you really can't go too far wrong by just watching any of those people's films. They stand the test of time, and they're still entertaining to watch. The final section in Component 2, Section D, is experimental film. Here you'll be looking at Pulp Fiction by Quentin Tarantino. It's another 20-mark question, and again you'll get the choice from two questions. The specialist areas of study here are auteur theory and narrative, with a focus on how Pulp Fiction gives an alternative form of narrative. It's important here to have developed a really solid understanding and knowledge of Tarantino as an auteur director and what characteristics make up his specific auteur signature. So watch at least one of his other films and look at how it uses similar ideas, narrative structure, techniques. You'll also need to know this film in depth, of course, and spend some time familiarising yourself with Pulp Fiction's narrative structure and in what ways specifically it could be considered experimental. So that's the content of Component 2 in a nutshell. A few final tips for success, however. Plan your responses carefully. Know what you want to say before you start writing it. Always answer the question directly and relate each point you make back to the question. Timings are hugely important. You have 4 sections and 5 films to write about it. If you're not careful, you can easily lose a lot of marks by running out of time. And if you miss a whole section, you are effectively throwing away 20% of your grade. Make sure you don't use more than 60 minutes on section A and then 30 minutes for sections B, C and D. And finally, know your films well. Know your specialist areas. Always aim to show the examiner that you are a keen and interested film student with your own ideas about these films, rather than just sort of rote learning points. Be invested in the film and have an opinion on it yourself and be able to support that opinion. That's what the highest attaining candidates are characterised by. That sort of secure knowledge within themselves and that sort of hunger for more knowledge. If you do all of that, you will be just fine. So check out the other videos which go into more depth about each of the individual topics. But for now, good luck.